Welcome everybody. Neil Custom from the Clover crew here for our podcast number 9 and really special guest Eddie Senatore here with me today, insolvency legend from the Canberra, New South Wales market over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
Welcome Eddie. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Neil.
I wanted to talk to Eddie, particularly in relation to the area of mediation, and Eddie's a licensed mediator, and it's a really important part of the litigation framework. And I just thought I'd talk to you and talked about some war stories on mediation particularly, and
Sure.
benefits, the good, the bad, the ugly,
Yeah.
how to pick the right mediator, and I guess some war stories, some of the learnings that you can share with some of the Clover audience.
Yeah, for sure.
Today.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the introduction, Neil. And I'm not sure I've ever been described as special. And 40 years summary certainly makes you feel like you've done the rounds in the kitchen. Mediation is an interesting area of practice. I've recently, in say the last half a decade, tapped into that area of work, mainly because the type of work that you're getting is not necessarily 100% insolvency. There's a mixture of advisory and a lot of the stuff more recently, and I have to say in the last 3 years, has been around disputes between directors, disputes between businesses, disputes between shareholders, and as insolvency practitioners, everything looks like a nail, so we just come out with the hammer. And when you do an insolvency, you basically set in this framework that helps you negotiate and helps you move the needles across, because your response to many of the issues that have been thrown up at you is it's the law, or the Corporations Act says that, or this is the latest judgment, we're following this course of action. As you deep into advisory, you don't have those rigid formats behind you, so you have to skill up on negotiation, and I thought mediation was one area where we could help solve some business issues without necessarily having to go off to the court to appoint a provisional liquidator, say, or appoint an administrator because no bills are being paid because everyone's refusing to sign checks because they have a lack of trust. So doing that work, doing that training has really opened up my eyes to looking at things differently, and not to the black letter of the law, to see if you can open up some opportunities to get advancement around discussions. And what's happened from that is I've actually taken on mediation cases that are deep in litigation or just about to launch in litigation, and we've been able to solve a few of those. We've been able not to solve a few of those, and I guess the common ground is something in between.
I think litigation is an extension of insolvency, mediation an extension of litigation. Did you find it was a pretty seamless sort of transition to become a mediator? Yeah.
When you do the mediation training, you're thrown into live mediation cases, and they're not insolvency related, not all of them. There are business issues, there are will and estate issues, there's just the neighbourhood complaint issues, and this is what I'm talking about, is having a look at the perspective of other people in the system that are impacted by what's going on. But yes, if you're doing insolvency, no doubt you've come across some litigation, and if you're doing litigation, no doubt you've been told that you have to go to a compulsory mediation, and you lock yourself up there in the mediation rooms and try and resolve things.
And what do you see as the benefits of mediation?
Yeah. So there's a lot of benefits to mediation. In fact, it'd be hard to say that there's any downside to it, really. First of all, and I think it's an important one because we miss this point often, is that we're in control of the situation. We're going to a mediation, or we ought to be going to a mediation voluntarily, with a view of solving the dispute or solving the issue that's causing the angst or causing a delay in getting to an outcome. So being in control at the start is really important. The second thing, and if anyone's been involved in litigation will know that you're not in control of your timeline when you're in a litigation process. you're at the whim of the system, and if the court's banked up, then you're banked up. And the problem with that, of course, is you have stressful moments, work intense moments, because the matter's before the court, it gets adjourned, or directions hearings get punted down the road. So you put the file down and then have to pick it up again. So you really don't ever get some closure. And the other benefit too is that you're in this environment where you're able to speak freely, so you start to understand what are some of the impediments on the other side that you wouldn't necessarily get in an adversarial setting. And of course, with those factors, then there's the issue of cost. Being able to resolve something means that you're more in control of the money in your bank account.
Yeah, I think it's cost effectiveness, that time flexibility to end the litigation earlier than going to a trial, which is expensive and for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that question of certainty too. Look, you're before the court, and with all due respect to the judges, you don't know the judges, and they're about to listen to the three sides of the story, which I say there's always the three sides. There's my side, your side, and the real side. And hopefully the judges get that. But it's a stranger to the problem. And so you're putting all your faith in, the stranger getting the outcome that you want. But you're in court, you're litigating, so it's a 50-50 chance, right? And that's what people need to realise.
But it's got to be better in terms of getting parties together, I won't say relationship building, but relationship understanding between the parties, rather than 10 paces in the court.
Yeah, getting people in the room, listening to the pathology of their case, but then really trying to get to the bottom of what's driving that behaviour. And there are some mediations. I had two shareholders that were in a dispute. One shareholder had put in all the money into this startup. We're talking a couple of $1 million. The other shareholder had all the technological knowledge, so he was putting in the sweat equity, let's say, because he knew how to write software. And they were at 20 paces, and this thing was simply going to collapse because there was no more funding, and the IT guy wasn't releasing any passwords or codes to where all the software was sitting. And we did two mediations. We ran one for 3 hours, then we gave it a rest, and then we came back together a few weeks later and did another 3-hour mediation. And in the end, these two guys who were just so opposed at each other came back together, and the funder opened up his checkbook, and the guy that was writing the code then revealed where the platform sat. So, pardon me, they're all come back together as friends, and there was nothing further to do. And those two mediations, it was the cost to that, to put something into perspective, was $4,000 for the first one and $4,000 for the second one. And now that software has continued to be developed.
It's interesting what you say about the two separate mediation times. I've seen personally that mediation can sometimes happen too early, and it can be court ordered, where perhaps evidence is not on, expert reports, etc. And it's not helpful.
Yeah. You've got to get the timing right, and there's a lot of cases on this and a lot of commentary on this, particularly coming out of the United States, where judges have said, look, there's actually a skill here for the attorneys to sit across the room and say, when's the right time to jump into mediation? There's this window. And if you don't get that window right, forget about it. And that's really important. So like most things, there's a bell curve to disputes, believe it or not. And what you're trying to do is not get to the top of that bell curve, because once you get past that bell curve, then the antagonists start thinking, well, if I'm not going to get anything, then the other guy's not going to get anything. So it's full-on fight. So you've got to capture it well before the bell curve. And sometimes, it might be opportune to sit down and have a mediation pre-discovery. Most lawyers and participants like to do the discovery. There might be something hiding in there, but that also works in your favour to say, well, they might find something that, really hasn't triggered my case, that I haven't thought about, something deep in history. So maybe we should have mediation before discovery. So there is a window, and it needs to get it right. And that's where it comes to the skill of the people working for, the shareholders or directors having the dispute.
Do you see mediation ever used as a tool to, guess, a delay tactic. A trial coming up perhaps, and let's do mediation and sort of try to push things back.
Yeah, sometimes you see that. You've got to get a sense of the room and see whether people are genuine or not about doing a mediation. So I always like to do a pre-mediation meeting with the people that are coming into the room, just to see if they're ready. And there's been plenty of cases that I haven't progressed as being the nominated mediator on some business issues because I didn't think one of the participants was ready. So if you're not ready, willing and able to come into a room and to help resolve the issue, there's no point having the mediation. Sometimes during mediation, you'll see that there's a case that at the end has a financial compensation. Money has to come from one source to the other, and it's a question of getting to that number. And like most humans, we say we don't want to pay as much, and the other side want to get as much. And you break into what's called shuffles, and you're going between the rooms, sort of bouncing offers. But you can tell when those offers are being made, whether it's genuine or not. And as a mediator, there's different types of mediations. There is this sort of court-mandated mediations, and you've got this restricted timeline. It either works or it doesn't, and the parties go back to court. We tried mediation, didn't work, move on. There's this facilitative mediation, which is the space I play in, where we try to work with the people and not get involved in the case pathology or pass any qualitative views about their cases, but talk to them generally about where this might end up. I was in a mediation a few years ago. I was actually with a liquidator and an accreditor trying to resolve a preference, and both parties had their lawyers and barristers, and that went straight into shuttles. And I was in the room with the creditor where counsel was saying, "Look, we're going to run these director duty claims, and we're going to go all the way into the court and run these breach of director's duties," which in my mind was a little bit odd because we were talking about a preference and there wasn't a director in the room. And when I walked the creditor through what that meant with the barrister's view about, it's going to take me 6 months to put a case together, but the truth of it is it's more likely to be 18 months. We've been around. It's going to cost, there's an estimate, council put up an estimate, but the reality of that, if it goes to 18 months, it's more likely to be double. So it went from like a $30,000 estimate to an $80,000 or $90,000 estimate. But we'll always get that money because we're going to win at the end of the day. And of course you might win, but you won't get it all back dollar for dollar. But in the meantime, if the case is delayed for up to 18 or 24 months, someone's got to pay the bills in the meantime. So you're having a punt. And in that matter, they started with a really low offer to try and settle the preference, and having that conversation and taking them through, counsel said, "Look, I've been in heaps of these mediations and we usually here till 10 o'clock at night. Why don't we just start with where we usually finish and put an offer?" And within a couple of hours, the mediation and the preference was settled, which is a fantastic result.
And so those pre-mediation meetings sound like a good idea, particularly to try to work out if both parties are there in good faith.
Yeah.
And do they want an outcome, or
Yeah.
are they just misusing the mediation sort of timetable?
Yeah, absolutely. What's becoming really popular at the moment is called mediation one-on-one, where you actually sit down with one of the parties and take them through a mediation process. Try and work out what's driving their behaviour to see whether that behaviour can be changed a little bit to enable them to appreciate mediation when they go into a mediation room looking to find a solution. Obviously, if I'm doing a one-on-one mediation with you, I can't be running the full mediation, but the mediation one-on-one is really, it's very much like coaching. It's like coaching a negotiation session, just trying to understand where the parties sit sort of mentally around how they see the lay of the land and point them in the right direction. That mediation, we're really looking to get to a settlement. And this is why I say there's no real downside to a mediation, because even if you don't resolve the substantive issue, you might be able to knock out 2 or 3 of the subordinate issues, which means when you're going to court, you're not arguing 3 or 4 points, you're arguing maybe 1 or 2, and that changes times and costs as well.
Yeah. It's I think anyone that's been involved in mediation, it's important to pick the right mediator, someone that can cut through the issues How do you see appointing the right mediator?
It's important, and it's not that you want to go out with the shopping trolley and do the catwalk business, but I think it's really important to get the right mediator for what's been heard. And if there's plenty of war stories, it's about getting the wrong mediator.
Yeah.
And as an IP insolvency practitioner, I was involved in a mediation as a participant. And it was quite a complex matter, and so the lawyers on the case thought it'd be good if we got a retired judge to run that mediation, and no disrespect to the retired judges, I think they have their place. I think also retired barristers or even current barristers are often put up as mediators, and I think they do have their place. Anyway, in that particular mediation, the room broke up very early again, and it was straight into shuffles. And the retired judge came back from the other side into our room and said, "Look, I've heard what this guy's got to say, and I've got to say, the case has just got no legs." So I'm sitting there as a mediator going, "That's the last thing I want my legal team to hear." And of course, they sat up nicely in their chair and said, "Yes, that's why we're starting. That's why we're starting this settlement conference at what might appear on the papers to be a low offer to start with, but really, when you look at the pathology of the case, it's probably reflective of the strength of their case. So we're starting at X dollars." So the mediator then took that to the other side and came back within a matter of minutes, and within 30 minutes of the mediation starting, declared to our room that the plaintiff had left the building and was offended by the offer. Now, there's a skill in this. It's not necessarily just about the pathology and about running the numbers. It's about, the plaintiff wanted more than just a number. He wanted his day in court. And so how do we get that? How do we give him a sense of, satisfaction that he's been heard? And if you're running a case that's $1 million claim and you start debiting at $5,000, well, he's not been heard. So I think getting that right. If you're in a room, say, with a couple of people that are having a go at it and they're fairly senior in a particular industry sector, then it makes sense to have a mediator that also has some gravitas, that's able to work on that emotional intelligence as opposed to the pathology of the case, if that makes sense. In walks, ex-judge so-and-so, esteemed, and sets the tone of the conversation that follows.
So you're touching on qualifications there. I mean, we talked about ex-judges and barristers, but I mean, you're an insolvency practitioner, accountant, now a mediator as well. There must be times when legalistic, you've got to cut through or bypass the legal discussion to say, we're here, how do we get out of this?
Yeah.
And how do we resolve it quickly?
Yeah, that's right. So with directors' disputes or shareholders' disputes or even preferences or general business disputes, I think as an insolvency practitioner, we've got a lot of skills to be able to help people solve those issues, because we see what happens if it doesn't come off. And it just costs too much money, and it costs not just the money but people's lives and how it impacts on their family. And this is a really interesting question. So let's talk about a shareholders dispute, for instance. And at the end of the day, we're talking about one shareholder wanting to get out, another one wanting to buy them out. What's at dispute is the share value. We can get independent reports and valuations about that, but really we're not having that discussion. We're talking about something completely different here. We're talking about someone that wants to get out. In a sense, she might be looking for freedom, and then the incumbent shareholder is wanting to, buy the shares, but she's looking at getting total control. So if we start talking about freedom and control, then that's got no relevance to the share price.
Yeah, it's emotional and intrinsic values, right?
Right. And if you do some training executive training at Harvard, they'll say, look, you've been told in negotiation and mediation, keep the emotion out of the room. Well, the Harvard guys are here to tell you, bring the emotion into the room, right? Because if you're not dealing with that, you're not going to get an outcome, because it's going to stop the progression of the discussion. So what's control really worth to you? Is it worth more than the extra, the share value? It has to be. And what's freedom worth to you? Sure, you may take a little bit less, but, you're walking into freedom and you're able to spend that money whichever way you want, maybe get into another business venture that makes more money. So they're the types of conversations you need to facilitate.
And resolving those issues at mediation's got to be better than dragging that into a lengthy and expensive trial.
Absolutely. I had a mediation between two directors, and they were both directors and shareholders. It was a professional services firm, two ladies, and they couldn't speak to each other. So I came in as mediator, and what was resolved was, we can't work together. Okay, now what follows from that? Okay, how do we get out? We don't want to sell the business. I want to take my share. You want to take your share. So we started to talk about, well, what does the breakup look like? What are the guiding principles behind the breakup? Things like, just to give the audience some perspective, is when we break up the business, no client is going to be disadvantaged. No client's going to be harmed. No employee is going to be disadvantaged or harmed. I'll take my clients, you take your clients, and then you get finally with the lease, we'll put it up for lease, see if someone wants to take the space. And then you get into the tricky business about the debtors and how to split up the debtors. And then, with professional services firms, what's the work in progress worth? And you sort of save that till last, because what you're wanting to do when you're having these mediations is let people have these wins. So the fact that they agreed they couldn't work together was a win. You actually can agree on things. You can agree on some issues. What's next? Okay, what are the guiding principles? So you can agree, and you get this momentum, and then you get to the difficult stuff, and then people are going to give concessions a lot easier.
Well, there's a lot of anecdotes and mediations in there in relation to leaving something on the table, leaving with not everything you want,
Yep.
or being 100% happy when
Yep.
you leave mediation.
Yeah. Well, that's always going to be the case, and this is where the mediation one-on-one and getting ready for mediation is really important. So, well, you might not be leaving anything on the table. Look at the opportunities you've now got because you're out of it. So with that creditor with a preference, done, dusted, don't have to worry about the liquidator. Again, the liquidator gets on with his business, and that creditor's moved on. We saw this in Hong Kong with the Lehman Brothers. And there was a lot of deposit holders that had to go through a process of proving their debts, and the Hong Kong jurisdiction set up this mediation process where they could mediate, the administrators, liquidators of Lehman Brothers could mediate the outcome for the deposit holders. But what they did there, which I thought was really clever, was they gave the deposit holders a series of education sessions about what is mediation, what's likely to happen if mediation doesn't resolve your issue, where do you sitting next, and the enormity of Lehman Brothers, who knows what that might be. So that education and leading in might lessen that feeling of sense that I left stuff on the table. And at the end of the day, big deal if you do. Look, you're out of here. You don't have to look back.
Yeah, massive cost saving too.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any tricky mediation lessons that you wanted to maybe share from you've come across over the last few years?
Yeah, as a mediator, it's definitely being impartial and trying to maintain that level of confidentiality. So when you break up into your separate meeting rooms, and that is the opportunity where you really need to work the players in the game so that they're thinking forward. And so getting stuck into why it happened and why they feel aggrieved, and getting into the weeds of that is really easy trap to fall into. But we're here now. You're going to have some stranger sort that out on the bench whenever, 6, 12, 18 months' time at a cost that we don't know yet. But today is all about forward thinking. What does the future look like? How are you going to able enact that future, and what does that mean you have to do here today to make that happen? So getting caught in the fight and getting caught in the pathology is tricky, because I think not being a lawyer is an advantage in that sense. You leave the pathology and the legal nuances to the lawyers, but coming in and trying to resolve it around that.
Look, it's been an awesome discussion about mediation, the good, the bad, the ugly of it, but there just seems the benefits to me always outweigh the time and costs going forward. But whilst you're here, obviously, Eddie, you're sharing this with the audience, a qualified football coach and
Yep.
been involved in the ACT League for a long time.
Yep.
World Cup's upon us.
Yes.
Any predictions for the Australian side in I think Group D? I wouldn't say it's the pool of the group of death, but it's going to be tough going.
It'll be tough going. There are some competitive teams in that group, and the USA's in there. And you would say, Australia would be fairly competitive. They've just got that competitive nous about them. But USA being in the USA, I think it has, it just has that additional pressure. I'd like to see the Australians do well. I think their coach is doing really well. I see that Graham Arnold with his teams having a good track record. So and getting them to the World Cup and then having a draw against Spain, as I know it was a friendly, but even still it was pretty good game. So we've got some influence happening on the world stage with the Australians. I don't think they'll come last in the group, but they might hover around the middle and cause some grief, I'd say.
I think they've definitely got to win a game.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be tough to progress. But
yeah. You never know. That third position, if they come third and they're the best of the third, who knows? They might. But look, I can tell you, with the soccer players and the referees, those guys need a lot of mediation because they're always rolling around and disputing on the pitch. So maybe FIFA should think about football mediators on pitch, football mediators.
Well, Eddie, thanks for spending some time with Clover today and our audience.
Really enjoyed it.
You're still best in show for hair. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.